broadcast is a fictional audio drama created for entertainment purposes. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, Tillamook County Perimeter, the Perimeter Broadcast. If you are hearing this transmission, emergency conditions are ongoing. The Pacific Ocean began withdrawing from the Oregon coast at approximately 4:11 this morning, and as of the time I am speaking, it has not stopped withdrawing. By the time this broadcast ends, no one will be using the word tide. I want to describe what that means in a way you can picture, because the official language is already lagging behind what people are seeing. If you were to walk out to the end of any pier in Garibaldi right now, you would not see water. You would see the pilings all the way down to their footings, black and dripping, and past the pilings you would see mud, and past the mud you would see more mud, and then rock, and then a slope plane of things that are not supposed to be in open air. A caller from the Harbor District, unverified but repeating in several forms, reports that the bay is empty to a distance he estimates at 3 miles, and that the boats that were tied at the marina are grounded on their sides in the mud. A coastal coordination desk is calling this event a negative tidal excursion of undetermined duration. A National Weather Service, in a bulletin timestamp 5:02 a.m., is calling it a prolonged low water anomaly. I want to be careful with that wording. Neither phrase, as far as this desk can tell, has ever been used in a public bulletin before this morning. Authorities are not calling it a tsunami drawdown. They are not calling it a seismic event. They are calling it, and I am reading this exactly, a condition currently under active observation. It is now 6:14 a.m. Pacific. The sun should be coming up in about 40 minutes. There is no fog on Highway 101 this morning, which anyone who lives here will tell you is itself unusual for June. Callers along the shoreline are reporting that the air, at ground level, has a strong low-tide odor, and that the odor is not diminishing with elevation. The desk is relaying that observation as received. This is KQWL 1620 AM, and we are continuing to relay verified information. It is now 6:22 a.m. Pacific. I want to start with what a regional emergency management office has confirmed, because I would rather begin from the firmest ground available and then move outward from there into the reports we cannot yet verify. At 4:11 a.m. this morning, tide gauges at Garibaldi, Nettitz, Pacific City, and Cape Mears recorded a simultaneous drop in water level. The word simultaneous is the one I want to underline. In an ordinary tidal cycle, the low at Pacific City lags the low at Garibaldi by a measurable interval. This morning, according to the coordination desk, all 4 gauges dropped together at the same minute, at the same rate. That is the first inconsistency the desk was asked to relay. The second inconsistency is the rate itself. A regional emergency management office reports that water levels along the Tillamook County shoreline fell approximately 50 vertical feet in the first 10 minutes of the event, and continued falling at a slower but steady rate through the pre-dawn hours. As of the last coordination call, the local water line is estimated at more than 200 vertical feet below mean low tide. I need to be precise about what that means. That is not a tidal figure. That is a figure that, on paper, does not have a category yet. The coordination desk is describing this as a calibration issue across multiple sensors, pending field verification. I am passing that along as received. I will only add that field verification, in this case, would consist of a person walking out onto what used to be the seafloor and looking at the sky, and several people have now done that, and their reports match the gauges. A verified institutional report from the Tillamook County Road Department indicates that Highway 131 west of Nettitz is being closed as a precaution, not because of damage, but because the shoulder of the road on the ocean side now overlooks what one of their crews described as a canyon. I am relaying that word as it was relayed to us. Canyon. A regional maritime authority has issued a general advisory asking all vessels currently grounded by the drawdown to remain in place and not attempt to walk inland across exposed seabed until conditions are assessed. That is the first restrictive advisory of the morning, and I am noting the time, 6:19 a.m. I want to be careful with that wording, because in the ordinary run of coastal emergencies, the first advisory tells you to move. This one tells you to stay where you are. It is now 6:26 a.m. Pacific. The desk has received a further verified report from the Tillamook County Road Department indicating that Highway 131 will remain closed indefinitely, and that Nettets Bay Road is being posted with barricades at the harbor turnoff. The department is not, at this time, characterizing the barricade as an evacuation control. The department is characterizing it as a viewing deterrent. I want to note that phrasing. The road is being closed not to prevent departure, but to prevent people from standing at the edge of it. It is now 6:31 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and I am going to move now to what callers along the perimeter are describing, with the standard hedges, unverified, uncorroborated, but repeating across multiple independent lines. A caller from the Bay Ocean Spit reports that from his position on the dune ridge, he can see the entire floor of Tillamook Bay. He describes it as flat, dark, and steaming faintly in the pre-dawn air. He reports that he can see the wreck of a fishing boat that, according to local record, went down in 1962 and was never recovered. He was calm on the line, which I mentioned because he was calmer than the desk expected. He said the boat was on its side and that the paint was still legible. We cannot confirm the identification. We are relaying that the account is being repeated by a second caller from a different position on the spit, who describes the same wreck at the same bearing. A caller from Oceanside reports that the sound of the surf, which she has lived with for 31 years, is absent. She reports that she woke up because of the silence and thought at first that she had lost her hearing. She reports that she opened her window and heard, instead of surf, a sound she compared to a large room being emptied. The desk is passing that comparison along as received. A caller from a dory fleet operating out of Cape Kiwanda reports that his boat is currently sitting upright on wet sand approximately 2 miles west of where he launched it yesterday afternoon. He reports that he is uninjured, that the boat is undamaged, and that he is not at present able to see the ocean from where he is standing. He reports that he can see other boats at intervals along what he described as the new ground. He reports that some of the other boats have people beside them, and that some of the other boats do not. I want to be careful with that last detail. The caller did not elaborate, and the desk did not press. I am relaying it because the same observation is coming in from 2 other positions along the exposed floor, and because a coastal coordination desk has now upgraded its bulletin from under active observation to under active observation, with field reports pending. That is a small change in wording. It is the first time this morning that official language has moved in the direction of the callers rather than away from them. It is now 6:39 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. We are continuing to relay verified information as it becomes available, and we will remain on the air. It is now 6:47 a.m. Pacific. I want to bring the desk back to institutional confirmations for a moment, because the picture the callers are giving us is running ahead of the language available to describe it, and I would like to slow that down. A verified report from the Port of Garibaldi Harbor Master's office indicates that all mooring lines at the commercial basin fail within the same 6-minute window between 4:11 and 4:17 a.m. The Harbor Master describes the failures not as breakage, but as slackening, which then became loading, which then became parting. As the vessels drop to the water level and then, past a certain point, stop dropping because they had come to rest on the mud. 22 commercial vessels are currently grounded inside the basin. No injuries have been reported inside the harbor perimeter. I am noting that the harbor master used the phrase, inside the perimeter, which suggests he is aware of reports from outside it, and is not yet willing to characterize them. A verified institutional report from a regional power administration, relayed through a regional emergency management office, indicates that no coastal generating facility has lost function, and that grid stability along the coast remains within normal parameters. I am passing that along because the desk has received 4 separate caller reports suggesting that the lights of Rockaway Beach went out at 4:11 a.m. and came back on at 4:14 a.m. The utility is not confirming that. The utility is stating that no outage was logged. I want to be careful with that wording. The utility is not saying there was no outage. The utility is saying the outage, if it occurred, was not recorded. A verified report from the Tillamook County Sheriff's Office indicates that dispatch is currently holding calls from approximately 140 coastal residents, and that response is being prioritized to persons known to be on or near the shoreline at the time of the drawdown. The Sheriff's Office is asking that non-emergency calls be deferred. That is the second restrictive advisory of the morning. The National Weather Service has updated its bulletin. The phrase, prolonged low water anomaly has been retained. The word temporary has been removed from the second paragraph. I want to note that specifically. The word temporary was in 5:02 a.m. bulletin. It is not in the 6:44 a.m. bulletin. Nothing has replaced it. The sentence now ends where the word used to be. That is the first time this morning I have seen official language subtract rather than add. I am passing that along as received. The desk expects a fuller statement from a coordination office within the hour. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 6:56 a.m. Pacific. The sun is up. I am going to describe what that looks like, because it is the first time this morning the desk has had daylight to work with, and because the callers are now describing what daylight has shown them, and I would rather relay it in an orderly way than let it accumulate. A caller from the observation deck at Cape Meares reports that from his elevation, roughly 217 feet above what used to be sea level, he can no longer see the Pacific Ocean. He reports that the horizon, as observed from the lighthouse, is a flat brown plain interrupted at intervals by darker channels which he believes are the deeper trenches of the continental shelf now exposed to open air. He reports that he cannot see standing water at any point in his field of view. He was, I want to note, the head lightkeeper's assistant for 11 years before retirement, and he is familiar with what the view from that deck is supposed to look like. He said, and I am paraphrasing carefully, that he does not have a word for what he is looking at. A verified report from the State Department of Transportation indicates that the coastal viewpoint pullouts along Highway 101 between Manzanita and Pacific City are being closed to public access, effective 6:50 a.m. The stated reason is unstable overlook conditions. I want to be careful with that phrasing. The overlooks are not unstable. The overlooks are the same overlooks they were yesterday. What they overlook has changed. The department is using the language of a landslide advisory to describe a situation that is not a landslide. I am passing that along as received. A caller from Nedditch reports that a large marine animal, which he identified as a gray whale, is lying in the mud approximately 400 yards west of the town's public beach access. He reports that the animal is alive. He reports that he can see it breathing. He reports that a small crowd is gathered on the beach access stairs, and that no one is going down onto the mud. I want to note that the caller did not ask what to do. He simply reported what he was seeing, and then he ended the call. The National Weather Service bulletin has been updated again. The word anomaly has been retained. The phrase low water has been replaced with sea level. That is the second subtraction of the morning. Prolonged low water anomaly has become prolonged sea level anomaly. I want to be precise about what that means. Low water is a tidal term. Sea level is not. The bulletin is no longer describing a tide. It is now 7:03 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM, and we are continuing to relay verified information. The desk is standing by for the next coordination call, which we are told will be issued before the hour. We will remain on the air. It is now 7:09 a.m. Pacific. The desk has received, in the last 20 minutes, an additional cluster of caller reports from communities along the Nehalem River corridor. The reports are converging on a single observation. The river, from the town of Nehalem down to the estuary at the highway crossing, is running west at a rate several callers describe as visibly faster than yesterday. One caller, a resident of 41 years, reports that the river now appears to be running downhill in a way it did not previously appear to run. I want to be careful with that wording. The caller is not saying the river has changed course. The caller is saying the slope of the water has changed. The desk cannot corroborate the observation. We can only note that a second caller at the highway crossing reports that the water under the bridge has dropped by an amount she estimated at the height of a pickup truck. A verified institutional report from the Tillamook County Road Department indicates that the department is dispatching a survey crew to the Wilson River Bridge and to the Kilchis River Bridge to log current water elevations against the ordinary datum. The department is not characterizing the dispatch as an emergency inspection. It is characterizing it as a baseline reset. I want to note that phrase, baseline reset. The department is preparing to redraw a baseline that, as of yesterday, did not require redrawing. It is now 7:22 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and I am signing back on after a brief coordination hold. For any listeners just joining us, at approximately 4:11 this morning, the Pacific Ocean began withdrawing from the Oregon coast. As of the last verified reading, the water line off Tillamook County is estimated at more than 400 vertical feet below mean low tide, and it is still moving. That figure has doubled since sunrise. I am relaying it as received. A coastal coordination desk has now issued its 7:15 bulletin. The phrasing has hardened in a way I want to walk through carefully, because it is the first bulletin of the morning to acknowledge that the condition is not correcting itself. The 7:15 bulletin describes the event as an ongoing negative sea level excursion, cause undetermined, duration undetermined, extent under active mapping. I want to be careful with that wording. The earlier bulletins described a condition. This bulletin describes an event. That is a small change. The desk considers it a significant one. A verified institutional report from a regional maritime authority indicates that all small craft advisories have been rescinded, not because conditions have improved, but because, and I am reading this exactly, the operational sea surface reference in prior advisories is no longer present within the advisory zone. The Maritime Authority is not, at this time, issuing a replacement advisory. It is holding. A caller from a north jetty at the mouth of Tillamook Bay reports that he walked out to the end of the jetty rocks at first light and looked down. He reports that he could see the base of the jetty for the first time in his life. He reports that the rocks continued downward past what he had assumed was their footing, and that they are set into a much larger structure of piled stone that he did not know was there. He reports that the piling extends in both directions along what used to be the bay entrance, forming what he described as a wall. I am passing that along as received. The desk cannot confirm the observation. We can only confirm that a second caller, from a different position on the jetty, is describing the same thing in the same terms. It is now 7:29 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. We are holding for the next update from the coordination desk. It is now 7:34 a.m. Pacific. I want to move to a verified report from a state public health authority, relayed through a regional emergency management office, because it is the first medical bulletin of the morning, and I would like to relay it before the call reports on the same subject begin to accumulate, which they are already beginning to do. The state public health authority reports that coastal hospitals in Tillamook, Lincoln, and Clatsop counties are seeing an increase in presentations for what the authority is describing as sensory disorientation of non-traumatic origin. I want to be careful with that phrasing. It is not a diagnosis. It is a description of a set of complaints being logged at intake. Patients are presenting with a feeling that the ground is tilting, that they are standing on a slope when they are on level ground, that the horizon is in the wrong place. I need to be precise about what that means. The authority is not saying the patients are wrong. The authority is saying the patients are reporting an experience that does not correspond to their immediate physical surroundings, and that the number of such presentations, as of 7 a.m., is approximately 14 times the ordinary weekly volume for the three counties combined. A verified institutional report from a regional medical center in Tillamook indicates that the hospital is not, at this time, admitting patients presenting with sensory disorientation as a primary complaint. It is logging them, providing hydration, and asking them to remain in the waiting area. The hospital is not calling this a triage decision. It is calling it observation pending further guidance. A caller from Bay City reports that she has been unable, since sunrise, to look at the western horizon without becoming nauseated. She reports that she can look north, south, and east without difficulty. She reports that when she turns west, her stomach turns with her. She was, I want to note, apologetic on the line, as though she were reporting something she had done rather than something that was happening to her. That is a tone the desk has begun to notice in a number of callers this morning. I am passing that along because the desk considers the pattern reportable. A verified report from a regional airport authority in the Portland metro area indicates that inbound flights from the Pacific are being routed through revised approach corridors in light of shoreline geometry, changes not yet reflected in current charts. That is a phrase the airport authority is using. Shoreline geometry changes. It is now 7:41 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., and we are continuing to relay verified information. It is now 7:48 a.m. Pacific. The coordination desk has issued its 7:45 bulletin, and I am going to relay it in full paraphrase, because it is the first bulletin of the morning that acknowledges the phenomenon is not confined to Tillamook County. Verified reports from tide gauges along the Oregon coast, the Washington coast north to Cape Flattery, and the Northern California coast south to Cape Mendocino indicate that the drawdown observed at 4:11 a.m. Pacific was regional in scope. The 7:45 bulletin describes the affected coastline as approximately 650 miles of continuous shoreline currently in negative excursion, with no gauge along that shoreline recording standing sea water within the ordinary tidal range. I want to be careful with that wording. The bulletin is not saying the water has gone down. The bulletin is saying along 650 miles of shoreline, there is no sea water where the sea water is supposed to be. A verified institutional report from a West Coast oceanographic laboratory, relayed at the request of a regional emergency management office, indicates that the laboratory has been unable, as of 7:30 a.m., to model the observed drawdown using standard oceanographic parameters. I need to be precise about what that means. The laboratory is not saying the model is difficult. The laboratory is saying the model does not converge. It is producing outputs the laboratory describes as physically unavailable. I am passing that along as received. A verified report from a regional emergency management office indicates that mutual aid requests have been received from coastal counties in Washington and Northern California, and that Oregon is holding those requests pending its own assessment. The office is asking non-essential travel to the coast be deferred. That is the third restrictive advisory of the morning. A caller from Astoria reports that the Columbia River, from the position of the Astoria Mega Bridge, is running visibly faster than usual, and that the water level under the bridge has dropped by an amount she estimated as the height of a boat cabin. She reports that the river is running west, which is ordinary, but that it appears to be running west toward nothing. That is her phrasing. Toward nothing. The desk cannot yet confirm whether the mouth of the Columbia is passing water into open air or into a channel that is itself descending. We are asking that question. We do not yet have the answer. It is now 7:55 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We remain on the air. It is now 8:04 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified institutional report from a Federal Geological Survey office, delivered through generic institutional channels, because it is the first scientific bulletin of the morning that uses language the desk has not heard before, and I want to be careful with how I pass it along. The survey office reports that its seismic instruments along the Pacific Northwest margin recorded no significant seismic event in the 24 hours preceding the drawdown. There was no earthquake. There was no submarine landslide of the magnitude that would produce a displacement of this scale. There was no volcanic activity. I need to be precise about what that means. The office is not saying that the drawdown is inexplicable. The office is saying that the ordinary explanations, in the order in which they would ordinarily be checked, have been checked and are not available. The office's bulletin uses the phrase, "no known mechanism at present." That removes the easy explanation. I am passing that along as received. A verified institutional report from a coastal coordination desk indicates that reconnaissance aircraft flown from a regional Air National Guard base have completed a first pass over the exposed shelf between Cape Meares and Cape Falcon. The pilot's report, relayed in summary, describes the exposed floor as extensively channeled, with standing pools of water occurring at intervals estimated at every 1 to 3 miles. I want to note that phrase, standing pools, not a receding sea. Pools. The pilots also report that at the outer limit of their pass, approximately 18 nautical miles west of the ordinary shoreline, the exposed floor continued westward as far as they could see, and that they did not, in the course of the pass, sight open ocean at any point in their field of view. A caller from Manzanita reports that a group of approximately 30 people has gathered at the north end of the town beach and is standing at the top of the beach access stairs, looking west. He reports that no one is speaking. He reports that he's been on the stairs himself for the last 20 minutes and that he cannot make himself go down onto the sand. He was, I want to note, not asking for help. He was reporting a fact about himself. The National Weather Service has updated its bulletin. The word prolonged has been removed. The bulletin now reads sea level anomaly, extent expanding, duration undetermined. That is the third subtraction of the morning. It is now 8:11 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. It is now 8:19 a.m. Pacific. I want to close this out with an update on the open threads the desk has been holding, because we've been carrying several unresolved reports since the pre-dawn hours, and I would rather account for them before we move into the next block. The first open thread, the dory operator west of Cape Kawanda, who reported at 6:31 a.m. that other figures were visible along the exposed floor. The desk has received a follow-up call from the same operator, time-stamped 8:04 a.m. He reports that he has walked approximately half a mile inland from his boat, and that the figures he had seen at a distance were, in the cases he approached, other fishermen and small craft operators who had been grounded by the drawdown. He reports that some of them were not. He did not elaborate on the second category. The desk did not press. I want to be careful with that wording. He said some of them were not other fishermen. He did not say what they were. I am passing that along as received, and the desk is asking for corroboration from any caller in the same area. The second open thread, the gray whale reported at Nettitz. A verified report from a regional marine biology institute, relayed through a regional emergency management office, indicates that at least 47 cetaceans have been reported grounded along the Oregon coast between Columbia River mouth and Cape Blanco. The institute reports that the animals are, in the majority of reported cases, still alive, and that no organized response is currently possible because responders cannot reach the animals without crossing exposed seafloor. The institute did not editorialize. The report ended without further comment. The third open thread, the Rockaway Beach outage that the utility declined to confirm. A verified institutional report from the utility, time-stamped 8:12 a.m., indicates that a review of internal telemetry has identified a synchronization event of undetermined origin at 4:11 a.m., affecting substation from Tillamook to Nehalem. The utility is not calling an outage. The utility is calling it a synchronization event. I am passing that along as received. A coastal coordination desk has issued a preliminary advisory recommending that residents of low-lying coastal communities remain within their homes and away from beach access points until further notice. That is the fourth restrictive advisory of the morning, and it is the first to use the phrase until further notice rather than a specified time. It is now 8:26 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We will continue. It is now 8:33 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified institutional report from a Federal Emergency Management Coordination Office, delivered through generic institutional channels, because it is the first federal tier bulletin of the morning, and I want to walk through the language carefully. The office reports that a national level coordination posture has been activated as of 8:15 a.m. Pacific. The office reports that inland states, including Nevada, Idaho, and Arizona, have been placed on a resource mobilization footing. I need to be precise about what that means. The interior states are not being asked to respond to a threat within their own territory. The interior states are being asked to prepare to receive persons and to release resources westward. The bulletin does not use the word evacuation. It uses the phrase population posture preparation. I am passing that along as received. The office further reports that Federal Aviation Coordination has been shifted to a wartime-style priority routing, and that non-essential trans-Pacific commercial traffic has been suspended pending assessment. The office is not, at this time, characterizing the suspension as a ground stop. The office is characterizing it as a corridor pause. I want to note that phrase, corridor pause. It is the first federal tier language of the morning that treats the airspace over the Pacific as itself under active reevaluation. The office concludes its bulletin with a paragraph the desk considers reportable in full paraphrase. The office states that no federal statement is, at this time, being prepared for public delivery, and that ordinary channels of federal communication will remain silent until a coordination posture has been established across affected regions. I want to be careful with that wording. The office is not saying nothing will be said. The office is saying that, for the moment, silence is a posture. I am passing that along as received. It is now 8:37 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. The federal tier is holding. The coordination desk, which is not a federal channel, is not, It is now 8:38 a.m. Pacific. I want to move back down to the coordination desk now because it has issued a bulletin in the interval. I am signing back on after a short hold to relay what the coordination desk has now formally acknowledged, because the language has shifted again, and I would like to walk through it carefully. For any listeners joining us, the Pacific Ocean began withdrawing from the shoreline of the American West Coast at 4:11 this morning. As of the 8:30 coordination bulletin, that withdrawal has been confirmed along the entire continental shoreline of North America north of the Baja Peninsula, and matching reports are now being received from the Aleutian Chain and from the Kamchatka Peninsula on the far side of the ocean. I want to be careful with that wording. The 8:30 bulletin uses the phrase matching reports. Not identical, not simultaneous, not coordinated. Matching. The bulletin does not yet claim that the drawdown is a single event. It reports that the pattern is the same in every location so far surveyed. A verified institutional report from a national meteorological agency in Japan, relayed through a coastal coordination desk, indicates that tide gauges along the Pacific coast of Honshu began recording negative excursions at approximately 8:11 p.m. local time, which corresponds to 4:11 a.m. Pacific. I need to be precise about what that means. The withdrawal in Japan began at the same instant as the withdrawal in Oregon, not the same hour, the same minute. The Pacific Ocean did not withdraw from one side and pile onto the other. It withdrew from both sides at once. A verified report from a National Meteorological Bureau in Australia, relayed at 8:20 a.m. Pacific, confirms that the eastern coast of Australia is reporting the same pattern. A verified report from a hydrographic office serving the western coast of South America confirms the same. The desk is now receiving matching institutional confirmations from every populated coastline on the Pacific Rim. A caller from Cannon Beach reports that Haystack Rock, which under ordinary conditions stands 235 feet above the surf, is now standing at the top of a slope. She described the slope as gentle and continuous, extending westward for as far as she could see. She reports that the rock, from its new elevation, no longer looks like a rock in the water. It looks, she said, like a small hill on land. That is her phrasing. I am passing along as received. It is now 8:45 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. The desk is holding for the next coordination call. We remain on the air. It is now 8:52 a.m. Pacific. The desk has received in the last 30 minutes a further cluster of caller reports from communities along Highway 101 between Tillamook and Lincoln City. The pattern in the reports is worth summarizing before it accumulates further. Callers are reporting that gas stations along the corridor are being asked by phone from their corporate offices to institute per-vehicle purchase limits. Callers are reporting that grocery stores in Tillamook, Cloverdale, and Nescowan have posted handwritten signs at their entrances asking customers to limit water purchases to 2 cases per household. Callers are reporting that the checkout staff at these stores are, in the majority of reported cases, still at their posts. No caller is reporting that the stores are closed. No caller is reporting that staff have left. The desk considers the pattern reportable because it is the first coordinated commercial sector response of the morning, and because it appears to be occurring in the absence of any public advisory to that effect. The advisory the desk received earlier this morning did not mention water purchase. The stores are acting ahead of it. It is now 9:02 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., and I want to begin this hour with a verified institutional report from an International Tsunami Coordination Center, relayed through a coastal coordination desk, because it is the first bulletin of the morning that acknowledges a phenomenon is not oceanographic in the ordinary sense. The center reports that at no point in the recorded history of Pacific Basin monitoring has a simultaneous negative excursion of this magnitude been observed. I want to be careful with that wording. The center is not saying this has not happened often. The center is saying this has not happened. It is a first record event. The bulletin uses the phrase, outside the parameter space of ordinary basin behavior. I need to be precise about what that means. The center is telling coastal authorities that the ocean is doing something the science of oceans does not, at present, describe. A verified institutional report from a West Coast oceanographic institution, relayed through generic channels, indicates that the total volume of water estimated to have withdrawn from the Pacific Basin as of 8:45 a.m. is, and I am reading this as it was relayed, not accounted for by displacement into any adjacent body. I want to walk through that sentence because it is doing a great deal of work. In an ordinary drawdown, water goes somewhere. It piles up against a shoreline. It inundates a low area. It becomes visible somewhere else. The institution is reporting that, as of the last measurement, the withdrawn water is not visible somewhere else. It is not, according to the available instruments, in any of the places water is capable of being. I am passing that along as received. The desk cannot corroborate the reading. We can only note that the institution issuing it is one of the most conservative in its field, and that its bulletin does not use the word missing. Its bulletin uses the phrase not accounted for. A caller from a coastal cannery north of Garibaldi reports that the workers on the morning shift arrive at the plant, unlock the doors, and then stood in the parking lot for approximately 40 minutes without going inside. He reports that no one has told them to go home. He reports that no one has told them to start work. He reports that the plant manager is in the parking lot with them. The coordination desk has issued a further restrictive advisory. All coastal harbors from the Canadian border to Cape Mendocino are closed to civilian foot traffic, effective 9 a.m. That is the fifth advisory of the morning. It is now 9:09 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. It is now 9:17 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified institutional report from a Federal Aviation Coordination Office, delivered through generic institutional channels. Because civil aviation is now the sector reporting the most concrete operational impacts, and I would rather relay them before the caller volume on the same subject overwhelms the desk. The office reports that all trans-Pacific commercial flights currently over open water are being redirected. I need to be precise about what that means. The redirections are not the ordinary kind. The redirections are not being made for weather or for airspace congestion or for navigational hazard in the ordinary sense. The redirections are being made because the ordinary emergency landing corridors along the Pacific Great Circle routes assume the presence of the Pacific Ocean beneath them, and the ocean beneath them is, at present, in the process of not being there. The office is not, at this time, grounding aircraft. The office is asking crews to plan routings under the assumption that ditching is not, for the moment, a survivable option. I want to be careful with that wording. Ditching is not, for the moment, a survivable option. That is not a phrase that appears in ordinary aviation bulletins. It is the phrase used in this one. A verified report from a coastal coordination desk indicates that a reconnaissance flight, dispatched at 8:30 a.m. Pacific from an air base in the Puget Sound region, has completed a westbound pass to a distance of 200 nautical miles from the ordinary shoreline. The pilots report that at no point in the pass did they overfly open ocean. They report that the exposed floor continues westward in the pattern of channels and standing pools previously described for as far as the aircraft ranged. The desk is asking the coordination office whether a further pass is planned. We are told the answer is yes. We are told the pass will extend further. We are not told how much further, and we are not told when. A caller from Warrenton reports that his fishing boat, which was tied at a dock at the mouth of the Columbia River, is currently sitting on wet sand at what he estimates is 15 feet below the level of the dock. He reports that he can climb down to the boat using a ladder his neighbor lent him. He reports that he does not know whether to move his belongings out of the boat or leave them where they are. It is now 9:24 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. Coal Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We are continuing. It is now 9:33 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a set of caller summaries from along the perimeter because the pattern of the calls has begun to converge in a way the desk considers reportable, and I would rather relay the pattern than any single call within it. The desk has received in the last hour 71 calls from residents along the Tillamook County shoreline. Of those, approximately 40 describe a sound. I need to be precise about what that means. The callers are not describing a sound the desk can identify. They are describing a low, continuous, non-directional tone, which they report hearing since approximately 8 a.m. Pacific. They describe it variously as a hum, a pressure, a note held on an instrument they cannot see. They report that it does not correspond to any equipment they can identify in their homes. They report that closing windows and doors does not change its intensity. Several of them apologized on the line for reporting it and said they were not sure it was real. I want to note that KQWL's own broadcast engineers, who are monitoring the transmitter output continuously, have advised the desk that they are not, at this time, detecting any anomaly in the station signal. That is important. The tone the callers are describing, if it exists, is not in the broadcast. It is, according to the callers, in the air. A verified institutional report from a regional university acoustics laboratory, relayed through a regional emergency management office, indicates that field microphones deployed at Cape Foulweather and at the mouth of the Yiquina River are recording a low-frequency signal, centered near 7 hertz, that was not present in yesterday's recordings from the same instruments. The laboratory is not, at this time, characterizing the source of the signal. The laboratory is characterizing its presence and its persistence and its geographic extent, which the laboratory describes as continuous along all monitored coastline. A caller from Pacific City reports that the dogs in his neighborhood have been standing in their yards since sunrise, facing west. He reports that they are not barking, and that they are not moving, and that they are not, to his eye, distressed. He reports that they are simply oriented. That is the word he used, oriented. I am passing that along as received. The desk cannot corroborate the observation. We can only note that 4 other callers, in 4 other communities, have described the same behavior in domestic animals. It is now 9:38 a.m. Pacific. The desk has been asked by the coordination office to relay, in the plain voice of this broadcast, that a wire service report currently circulating on national outlets is not consistent with the bulletins the coordination office has issued. I want to walk through that carefully. A national wire service has reported, in a story timestamped 9:22 a.m. Pacific, that the withdrawal has stopped and that water levels are beginning to recover along portions of the northern California coast. The Coastal Coordination Desk, in a bulletin timestamped 9:34 a.m. Pacific, states that no such recovery has been recorded at any gauge under its coordination. The desk further states that no source at the coordination office has communicated the substance of the wire service story. I want to be precise about what that means. The story is in circulation. The coordination office is not the source. The coordination office is not saying the story is false. The coordination office is saying it did not issue it. I am passing that along as received. The desk is not, at this time, in a position to reconcile the two. The desk will continue to relay what the coordination office reports, and will note, when the two accounts differ, that they differ. A second wire service report, timestamped 9:29 a.m. Pacific, cites an unnamed federal official as saying that the drawdown is being characterized internally as a first-order oceanographic event of finite duration. The Federal Emergency Management Coordination Office referenced earlier in this broadcast has not confirmed that characterization. The office has, in a bulletin timestamped 9:36 a.m., stated that no unnamed official has been authorized to speak on the matter. I am passing that along as received. The desk will not, at this time, prefer one account over the other. It is now 9:41 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. It is now 9:52 a.m. Pacific. I want to open this update with a verified institutional report the desk received 4 minutes ago, because it involves the station, and I would rather report it plainly than let it become known through some other channel. At 9:47 a.m., KQWL's broadcast engineers advised the desk that the station's primary transmitter, located at our fixed site on the Tillamook County perimeter, began registering a low-frequency modulation in its carrier signal that does not correspond to any input from this booth. I want to be careful with that wording. The station's output at the moment I am speaking is intact. The narration you are hearing is not being interfered with in any way audible to the listener. The modulation the engineers are describing is present in the carrier itself at a frequency and amplitude which, they report, corresponds to the 7 hertz signal being recorded by the acoustics laboratory at the coast. I need to be precise about what that means. Our transmitter is not receiving the tone as an audio input. It is not being broadcast to you as sound. It is present in the physical hardware of the transmitter. It is, according to the engineers, being introduced into the carrier from outside any electrical path the station controls. The engineers are calling it an unshielded environmental coupling. That is the phrase. I am passing it along as received. The station is not, at this time, going off the air. The engineers advise that operation can continue under current conditions. They also advise that they will remain at the transmitter site and that a second engineer has been called in. A coastal coordination desk has issued its 9:45 bulletin. The bulletin no longer describes the event as an anomaly. The bulletin now describes the event as a wide area negative sea level condition, cause undetermined, response posture defensive. I want to underline that last phrase. Response posture defensive. That is language ordinarily reserved for weather systems moving toward populated areas. It is being applied here to an absence rather than to an approaching thing. The bulletin also states, and I am reading this exactly, that the condition should be operated under as ongoing. That is the first time this morning that an official bulletin has instructed anyone to operate under the condition as ongoing. It is not language of correction. It is language of accommodation. I want to note that. It is now 9:59 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We remain on the air, and we are aware that the transmitter is now, in a small way, part of what we are reporting. It is now 10:06 a.m. Pacific. Before I move to the next report, I want to relay, in the plain voice of this desk, a statement the Coordination Office has asked broadcasters to pass along. The office reports that the volume of incoming institutional traffic has, as of approximately 9:45 a.m., exceeded the office's ordinary verification capacity. The office is asking that all field bulletins, wire service reports, and caller summaries be relayed, where possible, with a clear statement of whether the item has been corroborated by a second independent source. I want to be careful with that phrasing. The office is not saying that unverified reports should not be relayed. The office is saying that the label of verification should now be applied more narrowly than it has been earlier in the morning. As a result, the desk will, from this point forward, distinguish between verified reports, which have been corroborated by a second source, and single-source reports, which have not. I am passing that along as received, and I am noting, for the record, that a number of the reports the desk has relayed this morning would, under the tighter standard, now be relayed as single source. The desk is not, at this time, retracting those earlier reports. The desk is only tightening its label going forward. It is now 10:14 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified report from a reconnaissance aircraft dispatched by a Joint Aviation Coordination Office, because it is the first report of the morning that has, in the desk's judgment, changed the character of the event from an absence to a movement. The aircraft completed a westbound pass over the exposed Pacific floor to a distance of approximately 400 nautical miles from the ordinary Oregon shoreline. That is roughly twice the range of the earlier pass. The pilots report, and I am relaying this in careful summary, that at no point in the pass did they overfly standing open ocean. They report that the exposed floor continues, in the same pattern of channels and pools, to the limit of their range. They report that at their outbound turn, they observed, to the west of their position, a discontinuity. I need to be precise about what that means. The pilots describe a horizon line, running approximately north to south, beyond which the exposed floor terminates. They describe the terminus as a downward slope into what they characterize as a lower level not yet visualized from altitude. They did not overfly it. They turned back at the Coordination Office's instruction. I want to be careful with what I am about to say next. The pilots report that the discontinuity was, in their observation, moving. They report that it appeared to be receding westward at a rate they estimated but were not able to measure. They report that they observed the terminus for approximately 6 minutes before turning back, and that in the course of those 6 minutes, it was, in their words, farther away when they left it than when they arrived at it. The coordination desk is not, at this time, characterizing that observation. The desk is holding it for corroboration. A second aircraft is en route. The desk expect a further report within the hour. A caller from a private residence on the Nikini Ridge at an elevation of approximately 1,500 feet reports that from her deck, using binoculars, she can see the pattern of channels the aircraft described, and that in the last 30 minutes, she has watched the standing pools within her field of view diminish in size. I want to note, an atmospheric scientist by profession before retirement. She reports the observation without editorial. She reports that the pools are getting smaller, and that they are getting smaller at a rate she can see with her eyes. The Pacific is not, at this time, coming back. The desk considers it now defensible to report that the Pacific is continuing to leave. It is now 10:21 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. It is now 10:28 a.m. Pacific. The desk has received in the last 20 minutes a further cluster of caller reports concerning the 7 Hz tone. I want to relay the pattern rather than any individual call. Callers are now reporting that the tone is audible inside their homes with the windows closed, and that in a number of cases, small objects on interior surfaces are being observed to vibrate at intervals. A caller from Tillamook proper reports that a water glass on her kitchen counter has been producing a faint ringing since approximately 9:30 a.m. She reports that the ringing is not continuous. It is present, then absent, then present again, at intervals she has not been able to time. A caller from Bay City reports the same phenomenon with a hanging light fixture in a hallway. A caller from Nedditz reports that the pilot light on his gas stove has been visibly moving in its housing, and that he has turned the gas off as a precaution. I want to be careful with what I am about to relay. The Regional University Acoustics Laboratory referenced earlier in this broadcast has, in a supplementary report timestamped 10:19 a.m., indicated that the 7 Hz signal is no longer characterized as strictly acoustic. The laboratory reports that its instruments are recording a couple mechanical component in structures along the coast, and that this component is now being observed at inland stations as well. The laboratory is not, at this time, characterizing the source of the coupling. It is characterizing the fact of it. I am passing that along as received. It is now 10:33 a.m. Pacific. I want to close the third hour of this broadcast with an update on the open threads the desk is carrying, because we have accumulated several unresolved reports over the last 2 hours, and I would rather account for them before we move into what the Coordination Office is now describing as the operational assessment phase. The first open thread. The reconnaissance discontinuity observed at approximately 400 nautical miles west of the Oregon shoreline. The second aircraft has departed. We do not yet have its report. The desk expects it before the next sign-on. The second open thread. The 7 Hz signal in the station's carrier. KQWL engineers report that the modulation is stable, that it has not increased or decreased in the last 30 minutes, and that no additional coupling has been observed in the station's secondary equipment. They report that the tone is now being registered by acoustic instruments at inland sites as far east as Bend, Oregon. I need to be precise about what that means. The signal, when it began, was reported only along the coast. It is now being reported inland. It is not, at this time, being reported east of the Cascade Crest. That is where the desk is holding the observation. The third open thread. The dory operator west of Cape Kiwanda. The desk has not received a further call from that number. The desk has tried the number twice in the last hour. The line does not connect. I am reporting that in the open, because the coordination desk is now asking listeners with family members currently on the exposed floor to contact the county sheriff's office and provide identifying information. That request is being made in the ordinary voice of missing person coordination. The desk is passing along as received. The fourth open thread. The gray whale at Nedditz and the 47 cetaceans reported earlier. A verified report from the Regional Marine Biology Institute, timestamped 10:20 a.m., indicates that the majority of the reported animals have, in the intervening hours, ceased breathing. The report does not use the word died. It uses a phrase cease respiration under exposure. I want to note the choice of words. The coordination desk has issued its sixth restrictive advisory. All residents of coastal communities west of Highway 101 are advised to consider relocation inland to elevations above 200 feet. The advisory is not, at this time, a mandatory evacuation. It is described as a precautionary posture recommendation. I want to be careful with that phrasing. The advisory does not say what it is precautionary against. There is no wave coming. There is no water at all. It is now 10:41 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We will continue. It is now 11:04 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Cold Harbor Emergency Relay Network, and I am signing back on after coordination hold that ran approximately 20 minutes longer than the desk had been told to expect. For any listeners joining us, the Pacific Ocean began withdrawing from the shoreline at 4:11 this morning. The withdrawal has been confirmed along every populated coastline of the Pacific Basin. The withdrawal has not stopped. As of the last coordination bulletin, the ordinary shoreline of Tillamook County lies more than 400 nautical miles east of the nearest observed water. A verified institutional report from the 2nd Reconnaissance Aircraft, dispatched at 10:14 a.m. Pacific, has now been relayed through a coastal coordination desk. The aircraft completed a westbound pass to a distance of approximately 720 nautical miles from the ordinary shoreline. The pilots report that they overflew the discontinuity described by the first aircraft. They report that beyond the discontinuity, the exposed floor descends into what they characterize as a second terrace, lower than the first by an amount they estimated at several thousand feet. They report that they did not sight standing water at any point in the pass. They report that at their outbound turn, they observed a second discontinuity, farther west, receding at what the pilots described as a rate visible from the cockpit. I want to be careful with that wording. A rate visible from the cockpit. The pilots are reporting that the edge of the sea, whatever that phrase now means, is moving fast enough that a person watching it move can see it move. I am passing that along as received. A verified institutional report from a National Oceanographic Administration, relayed through generic channels, indicates that the agency is, as of 11 a.m., no longer characterizing the event as a drawdown. The agency is characterizing the event as a directional migration of the Pacific water mass, vector west-southwest, cause undetermined. I need to be precise about what that means. The word directional is doing significant work in that sentence. The ocean is not disappearing evenly. It is going somewhere. It is now 11:11 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 AM, and we are continuing to relay verified information. It is now 11:22 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified institutional report from a coastal coordination desk, delivered 5 minutes ago, because the language in it has hardened in a way I would like to walk through carefully. The coordination desk has issued its 11:15 bulletin. The bulletin no longer describes the event as a condition, or as an anomaly, or as an excursion. The bulletin describes the event as, and I am reading this exactly, the ongoing state of the Pacific coastline. I want to underline that phrase, the ongoing state. The bulletin does not describe a departure from a baseline. The bulletin describes a baseline. It is the first bulletin of the morning, in which the withdrawal is not the exception. It is the ordinary case from which further departures may or may not occur. The bulletin advises coastal residents to operate under the assumption that the ordinary shoreline is not, at present, a functional feature of the local geography. I need to be precise about what that means. The bulletin is not saying the shoreline has moved. The bulletin is saying the shoreline, as a concept, is no longer in operation. It is asking residents to plan without reference to it. The bulletin also states that no time frame is presently attached to the condition. That phrase appears in the bulletin twice. No time frame is presently attached to the condition. I want to note the repetition. It is unusual for a coordination bulletin to repeat itself within the same document. The desk considers the repetition intentional. A verified institutional report from a National Weather Service, relayed at 11:18 a.m. Pacific, indicates that the service is discontinuing marine forecasts of the Pacific coast until further notice. The forecasts are being discontinued not because the service is unable to produce them, but because, and I am reading this exactly, the geographic domain to which the forecast refers no longer within the region of interest. I want to be careful with that wording. The region of interest is a technical term. It means the area the service is describing. The service is saying that the Pacific coast, in its current condition, is not the area the service was designed to describe. The service is not, at this time, indicating whether a new domain will be defined. A caller from the Halem reports that her husband, a retired merchant mariner, has been sitting on the porch since sunrise, looking west, and has not spoken. She reports that he is not distressed. She reports that he is simply not, at present, speaking. I am passing that along as received. It is now 11:30 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 11:44 a.m. Pacific. I want to relay a set of caller summaries and one verified institutional report because the character of the calls has shifted in the last hour in a way the desk considers reportable. The desk has received in the last hour 112 calls from residents along the Tillamook County perimeter. The calls are in the majority not describing new phenomena. The calls are describing decisions. I need to be precise about what that means. Residents are calling the desk to report that they are or are not relocating inland. They are reporting that they have loaded their vehicles or that they have not loaded their vehicles. They are reporting that they have called family members in other states or that they have not. Several callers have asked the desk what to do with their pets. The desk is not at this time in a position to answer that question. The desk is passing the calls to the County Emergency Management Office, which has been receiving the same calls, and which has issued a general advisory asking residents to prepare for extended power and water uncertainty regardless of whether they relocate. I want to note that phrase, regardless of whether they relocate. The advisory is not at present telling residents to leave. The advisory is telling them that the decision does not, from the county's perspective, affect the guidance. A verified institutional report from a regional power administration relayed through a regional emergency management office indicates that grid frequency along the coastal corridor has begun to drift within a band the administration describes as outside ordinary tolerance, but within contained margins. The administration is not, at this time, characterizing the drift as a failure. The administration is characterizing it as a monitored condition. I need to be precise about what that means. The lights are on. The lights are being kept on by hand. A caller from Tillamook proper reports that the checkout lines at a large grocery store on Highway 101 extended, as of 40 minutes ago, from the registers to the back of the store. He reports that the store was calm. He reports that the shelves for bottled water were empty and that no one was arguing about it. He reports that people were standing in line with the items they had and paying for them and leaving. I am passing that along as received. The desk considers it worth noting because the tone of the report matches the tone of nearly every call the desk has received in the last hour. The perimeter is not, at this time, in panic. The perimeter is in a condition for which the ordinary language of civil emergency does not have a good word. It is now 11:52 a.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m. It is now 12:08 p.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified institutional report from an international coordination office, delivered through generic channels, because it is the first report of the day that describes what has been happening on the far side of Pacific in language matching what we have been reporting on this side. The office reports that observations from coastal stations on the Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Philippine, Australian, New Zealand, Chilean, and Peruvian coasts are converging. All stations report a directional migration of the Pacific water mass. The vector reported from the western Pacific Rim is east-northeast. The vector reported from the eastern Pacific Rim is west-southwest. I need to be precise about what that means. The two vectors do not, in any ordinary sense, describe water flowing from one side of the basin to the other. They describe water leaving both sides toward a common region. The office is not, at this time, characterizing that region. The office is asking that its instruments be given time to converge on a location. The office expects a further bulletin within 4 hours. A caller from a private residence at Nikini Ridge, the same caller who reported the diminishing pools at 10:14 a.m., reports that in the last hour, from her elevation, she had begun to see stars. I want to be careful with that. It is not yet noon on the Oregon coast. She reports that in the far western sky, near the horizon, at an elevation which she estimates at 5 degrees above the current visible plane of the exposed floor, she can see, faintly, points of light. She reports that they are steady. She reports that they are not aircraft. She reports that the sky above them is the ordinary color of a summer noon. I am passing that along as received. The desk cannot corroborate the observation. We can only note that the caller has, so far this morning, reported nothing that has not later been confirmed by an institutional source. The coordination desk has issued its 7th restrictive advisory. Coastal residents are now advised, and I am reading this exactly, to consider the coast for the purposes of daily activity closed. I want to underline that word. Closed, not evacuated, not restricted, closed. That is the phrase the advisory uses. It is a phrase that, until this morning, the desk had not heard applied to a coastline. It is now 12:16 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. It is now 12:34 p.m. Pacific. I want to relay a verified institutional report from a coastal coordination desk, delivered at 12:30 p.m., because it is a report the desk has been holding for since sunrise, and I would rather relay in the ordinary voice of this broadcast than let it come through some other channel. The coordination desk has, as of 12:30 p.m., formally reclassified the event. The reclassification, in full paraphrase, is as follows. The condition, previously described as a negative sea level excursion and subsequently as a directional migration of the Pacific water mass, is now described as the standing configuration of the Pacific Basin. I want to walk through that phrase carefully. The standing configuration, not a departure, not an event, a configuration. The word standing is doing the same work in that sentence that the word ongoing did in the earlier bulletin. It is not language of change. It is language of settlement. The desk further advises, and I am reading this exactly, that planning, response, and daily operations should proceed under the assumption that the pre-event Pacific coastline is not expected to return. I need to be precise about what that means. The bulletin is not saying the water will not come back. The bulletin is saying that it is not to be planned for. It is not to be prepared for. It is not to be expected. That is the strongest institutional language the desk has relayed today. It is language ordinarily used for permanent features of a landscape. The bulletin further states that the acoustic signal recorded at 7 Hz along the coast and the modulation observed in the station's carrier are being reclassified from an unshielded environmental coupling to an ambient environmental feature. I want to note that the tone is no longer an anomaly. It is, according to the bulletin, part of the world now. A caller from Manzanita reports that from the town beach, where a small crowd remains gathered at the top of the access stairs, one can no longer see channels or pools on exposed floor. One can see, she reports, only a level, wet, dark plain, and beyond it, at the western horizon, a slight brightening that she cannot identify. She reports that the crowd is quiet and that no one is left. I am passing that along as received. It is now 12:41 p.m. Pacific. This is KQWL 1620 a.m., Cole Harbor Emergency Relay Network. We are continuing. It is now 1:03 p.m. Pacific. I want to close this broadcast at the top of the afternoon because the coordination desk has issued its final bulletin of the morning cycle, and because the desk would like to say, as plainly as it can, what the last 9 hours have produced. The final morning bulletin, delivered at 12:58 p.m., reads, in full paraphrase, as follows. The Pacific coastline of North America, as observed at ordinary sea level, is not, at this time, present. Observation of its return is not, at this time, anticipated. Planning, response, and civil operations should proceed under a standing operating posture, day by day, until further guidance is available. Further guidance, the bulletin adds, may not be available within an ordinary planning horizon. I want to underline that phrase. Not within an ordinary planning horizon. It is language of years, not of hours. The coast is quiet. The tone in the air, at 7 Hz, is quiet, or has become part of what quiet is. The sun is behaving ordinarily. Highway 101 is passable in both directions. The lights are on. The station is broadcasting. The desk has, at this hour, no institutional bulletin to relay that contradicts the standing configuration. A caller from the same private residence at Nikini Ridge, at 12:55 p.m., reports that the faint points of light she observed near the western horizon at midday are still there, and that they have not moved. She reports that she does not intend to call again. She thanked the desk. I am passing that along as received. KQWL 1620 a.m. will remain on the air through the afternoon and into the overnight, under a standing operating posture. The 7 Hz coupling in the transmitter carrier is, at this time, stable. Our engineers are remaining at the site. A second engineer has been called in. The desk will continue to relay verified information as it becomes available. The desk will not, at this time, attempt to explain what has occurred. Because no explanation has been offered by any institution the desk considers reliable, and the desk will not construct one on its own. I want to close on the last restrictive advisory of the morning, which was issued at 12:59 p.m. Coastal residents are advised to remain within the perimeter of their ordinary communities, and to consider the western horizon for the purposes of daily life, no longer a routine feature to the local landscape. That is the phrasing the advisory uses, not a routine feature. It is now 1:11 p.m. Pacific. The tides have not returned. The bulletins no longer expect them to. The desk does not, at this hour, expect them either. Remain within the perimeter. This is KQWL 1620 AM, Coal Harbor Emergency Relay Network.